Hello, my fellow spirit souls. Today we will be finishing our three-part series on the spiritual master, reading from Amritavani, Nectar of Instructions for Immortality by His Divine Grace, Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakura Maharaj. And so we read the first, I think it was 54 numbers. Those comprise parts 1 and 2. So from here we will finish up, starting with 55. 55. Why is the spiritual master called Prabhupada or Vishnupad? Since the spiritual master is conversant with the science of Krishna and is the personification of the highest service to the Lord, his disciple considers him just like Krishna Chaitanya or Hari himself. Therefore, the disciple addresses him as Vishnupad or Prabhupada. 56. How does a Vaishnav who is fixed at his spiritual master's lotus feet think? Unless I realize that all the people in the world are worshipable, I cannot offer my respectful obeisances to my spiritual master. My spiritual master is the spiritual master of the entire world. People who are envious of my spiritual master are also envious of the Supreme Lord and of every other human being. Until I feel this conviction in my heart, I cannot become a real servant of my spiritual master and cannot surrender at his lotus feet. Neither will I be able to understand that I am the most insignificant created being. Therefore, I will not be able to chant the holy name of Hari, thinking myself as lower than a straw in the street and more tolerant than a tree. I will not be devoid of the desire for respect or prepared to offer respect to others. If I respect my spiritual master properly, I will be able to respect the whole world. This will make it possible for me to become free of the desire to receive respect for myself and thus able to glorify Lord Hari constantly. 57. Who is a spiritual master? The spiritual master is the one who can protect me from death in the form of material existence. The bona fide spiritual master is the one who can deliver me from the fear or anxiety generated by death. When I approach my spiritual master, I do not need to hear from anyone else. He is the source of all auspiciousness and the hands into which the all-auspicious Supreme Lord has entrusted my well-being. By the spiritual master's grace, my mentality of false proprietorship is destroyed. The spiritual master is Krishna's potency. He plants Vedic knowledge in our hearts, makes us feel lower than the straw in the street, makes us more tolerant than a tree, removes our desire to be respected, teaches us to offer others our respect, and empowers us to always glorify the Supreme Lord in everything in relation to him. The spiritual master alone is capable of delivering us from the clutches of Maya. The spiritual master is he who awards me the knowledge that everyone in this world is worshipable. He teaches me that everyone is my spiritual master and that I am Krishna's eternal servant. He also teaches me that service to Krishna is my occupational duty. When I was in film school, I was practicing mystic yoga, and there was one time I was in a sort of meditative state, and I ended up astro traveling out of my body through what we consider space, and I felt all these different, almost like planetary systems pulling my energy. I felt a very succubus, vampiric energy, and then I projected love from my heart chakra towards those, and then it kind of released me from them, and then I experienced a kind of more joyous and celebratory energy, and I was into that, and it was all about feeling my way through space at what they say, at the speed of mind. But I eventually came to a giant door, and this door kind of opened and this light hit me. And I later learned that was the light coming off of Krishna's body. And I was hit with the message, you're going to be sent back, because I was kind of in this aloof state, really detached from anything material, kind of falsely renounced. And the message I received was, you're going to be sent back, and your duty is to help others dissolve their fear of death. And so looking back at what it says here, the bona fide spiritual master is the one who can deliver me from the fear or anxiety generated by death. And so at the time, I didn't know, how am I supposed to help others? and dissolve their fear of death, as the message was given to me in that form. So I eventually, 2 months later, found Srila Prabhupada's books, and from there I learned this sacred science, the science of self-realization, and that freed me from the anxiety associated with needing to perform some sort of material duty, and thereby, being afraid of death itself. Because, we could die at any moment. It could just end like that. And as long as we are relying on the strength of the Lord and our spiritual master, we have full shelter of those two. We have no need to have anxiety, because we realize that they are giving us everything we need and nothing more. And so anything that we desire beyond that is our own, materiality coming to the surface. And by presenting that to them, it dissolves that as well. So everything we do is meant to be spiritualized for a spiritual master. And by that process of just offering everything in the mood of humility to the Supreme Lord and the spiritual master, we will automatically become purified. It's very beautiful. 58. Do the spiritual master and the Vaishnavas approve all of our actions? As a good doctor does not prescribe cures according to the patient's desire, a bona fide spiritual master does not falsely encourage or flatter conditioned souls. I have no qualification to approve the actions of those who display or will display devotion to their fathers and mothers in order to achieve worldly happiness and peace. Our hearts are not righteous like theirs. We follow Vedic injunctions. Our aim and ideal is simply to practice devotional service. Therefore, we are unable to pay attention to anything else. Neither can we take anyone else's advice while becoming indifferent to the service of Guru and the Vaishnavas. Vaishnavas, again, are the purified preceptors of the Absolute Truth. We have no time to serve others while indulging in mental speculation, renouncing the Lord's service, which is our constitutional duty. Yes, so anytime we rely on our own understanding, we automatically fall down into materiality. And so our intelligence needs to become purified. We need to dismiss everything we've collected, the intellect, and rely on the internal intelligence, which comes from the heart. I think it was, the science has even proved that there is a space in the heart that contains like the same kind of tissue that is found in the brain. And this is the seat of the Supersoul, which is the Supreme Lord, the Supreme Personality's plenary expansion. So his temporary manifestation within this material space is called the Supersoul. In Christianity, some people, it's kind of referred to as the Holy Spirit, but a lot of people think of the Holy Spirit as something external that hits us. No, it's actually something internal that's boiled up from within. And it actually has to be uncovered, like a well that's been, plastered over for a long time. We need to chip away at that until we can get at the nectar of life that is within us. And that wellspring of knowledge then comes forth, that's true intelligence. So the last line, it says, we have no time to serve others while indulging in mental speculation, renouncing the Lord's service, which is our constitutional position. Our constitutional duty is to be in the Lord's service. 59. Is it proper to consider the spiritual master as God or the supreme enjoyer? The spiritual master is not the supreme enjoyer like Krishna. In other words, he is not Gopinath, the beloved Lord of the Gopis. The spiritual master is the servitor God. In that sense, he is as good as God, most dear to God, and the Lord's topmost devotee. The spiritual master is the predominated God. He is not the predominating God like Krishna or the original predominated God like Sri Radha. The spiritual master is non-different from Gauranga. That is, he is simultaneously one and different from Sri Gauranga. He is the manifestation of Sri Gauranga. He is the predominated absolute truth. If we attempt to merge him with the existence of the predominating absolute truth and thereby destroy the identity of the predominating absolute truth, we will be guilty of the offense of impersonalism. Such thinking is purely impersonalism, atheism. Shastra states, Yadyapi Amara Guru Chaitanyara Dasa Tatapi Janiye Ami Tanhara Prakasha. Although I know that my spiritual master is a servitor of Sri Chaitanya, I know him also as a plenary manifestation of the Lord. Tata Krishna Bhaje Kara Guru Ra Sevana Maya Jala Chute Paya Krishnera Charana. If the conditioned soul engages in the Lord's service and simultaneously carries out his spiritual master's orders, serving him, he can become freed from Maya's clutches and become eligible for shelter at Krishna's lotus feet. Under the shelter, guidance, and order of the spiritual master who is dear to Krishna, we should worship Krishna. That is the Shastric verdict. So Shastra is another word for scripture, except Shastra can be considered almost more pure than biblical scripture, because Shastra is direct revelation from God through the living deity, as opposed to inspired revelation. It's direct, so it comes straight through the Vaishnavas, the divine preceptors. Another thing we see here is the mention of impersonalism. So each one of us is meant to have a personal relationship with the spiritual master and with God. Now, quite ironically, we can see during this time, the coronavirus is causing people to turn to impersonalism on a massive scale, masks, social distancing, whatever that means, and, spacing out, your distance between people and such. This is all, satanic indoctrination. Now, satanic in the sense that we are both divine and demoniac beings. I think the word Satan and satanic holds a lot of baggage, but it simply means that we are of mixed quality. The being that covers our soul is of mixed quality. It is both divine and demoniac. Now, the process of Krishna consciousness and purifying the vessel is meant to extricate us from the demoniac mentality, and so that we're fully situated in divine mentality. That way we become a Brahmin, which is a priestly class individual, and then from there we can become a Vaishnava, a fully purified individual. It's very sad to see certain churches, I speak on this often because it's close to my heart, but the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I just saw this morning that their April General Conference will be purely virtual. And my question to them, I posed through, Twitter, was, why is a church based on a personal relationship with God and the spiritual master, falling to impersonalism? It's because of fear. It's kowtowing to the social norms that have been imposed upon us, even though we know that it's unnatural to wear a mask. It's unnatural to, I won't go on that tangent because I know that the people who are imposing those have their reasons, but they're certainly not spiritual reasons. 60. Who can act as our spiritual master? Only the great personality who has been sent by the Lord from the spiritual world into this world to deliver fallen souls like us, who delivers people who are afflicted with the threefold miseries and sends them back to Godhead, who is most dear to the Supreme Lord and who represents him, and who is the messenger of transcendental subject matter, is capable of acting as our spiritual master. He is an actual devotee and an actual spiritual master whose acts, like words, remain always sharpened to sacrifice our propensities for material enjoyment and dry renunciation. I love that. I'm going to read it again because I love it so much. He is an actual devotee and an actual spiritual master whose acts, like words, remain always sharpened to sacrifice our propensities for material enjoyment and dry renunciation. And this actually echoes what it says in the book of Revelation, where I will come at them with the sword of my mouth. So there it is. A spiritual master is that person who has no concept, duty, or business other than Krishna's service, and who understands that Krishna is the only object of service. He is not eager to hear anyone's flattery, and he is a brave preacher of the absolute truth. One who does not speak anything other than Hari Katha, topics about Krishna, who does not instruct others to do anything but serve Hari, and who does not himself engage even for a moment in any activity other than such service, is qualified to be a spiritual master. An insincere hypocrite cannot be guru. One who aspires for mundane activities cannot become a spiritual master. Pseudo-spiritual masters should be exposed. If a spiritual master utilizes the ingredients collected by his disciples, the wealth, alms, etc., for his own enjoyment or simply to accumulate gold, women, and fame, his disciples should totally reject such a spiritual master, knowing him to be a cheater. I need to mark that because that is so true. We have so many pseudo-gurus in this day and age who are purporting themselves to be spiritual masters, but you judge a man by his fruit. And if he has the ability to aid us in uncovering the super soul so that we can feel Krishna within ourselves, then he can be considered a spiritual master. Otherwise, he's doing it for his own false aggrandizement. The false ego is very subtle, and so we can easily confuse it with the super soul, but it is not. It is not. It is totally different. It's as he would say, as Bhaktisiddhanta would say, it's like the difference between milk and water with limestone in it. We should not hear anything from such dishonest persons. A person who usurps the ingredients meant for Krishna's service can never be called a spiritual master. The Narada Purana states, Iha yasya hare dasye karmana manasa gira nikilas viyapi avasta su jivan mukta sauchyate. A person acting in Krishna consciousness with his body, mind, intelligence, and words is a liberated person even within the material world, although he may be engaged in many so-called material activities. Quoted in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1.2.87. We need not associate with the atheists who have come to engage in social service rather than Krishna's service. Such people can benefit neither themselves nor others. While performing social service, they fall into Maya's pit and make others fall into that pit also. We do not associate with those who make a show of chanting the holy names on beads just to chant the Lord, or who raise a great hue and cry, yet do not see Krishna in every sound vibration, in Gaura Sundar in every utterance. The goal of all knowledge is to develop our relationship with Krishna. If we develop our propensity to serve the Lord under the spiritual master's order, in the association of devotees, we will learn to see the entire world is made for the Lord's service. We will then utilize everything we see for that service and thus attain auspiciousness. If we associate and serve with that great personality who sees the Lord everywhere, who sees everything in relation to the Lord, who sees his spiritual master everywhere, who thinks himself humbler than a blade of grass, who is more tolerant than a tree, who does not desire respect for himself, who is always ready to respect others, and who in this way constantly chants the Lord's holy name, then the path to perfection will open. Simply out of good fortune, we obtain such a bona fide spiritual master. We cannot reach Gaura Sundar's shelter by accepting a servant of Maya as our spiritual master and thus maintaining our enjoying spirit. Although Sri Gaura Sundar may not currently be present in this world, if we sincerely associate with Guru and the Vaishnavas, dovetailing our mentality with the mentality of such Vaishnavas, if we mix our desire with their desire, then we will, by the mercy of Sri Gaura Sundar, certainly attain auspiciousness. If we can take complete shelter at the lotus feet of a spiritual master who is conversant with the science of Krishna, then by his proper association, service, and subordination, we will attain ultimate benefit. The point that stuck was we need to associate with the atheists. We need not associate with the atheists who have come to engage in social service rather than Krishna's service. So anybody that makes our material life more comfortable, we should be very skeptical of without helping us purify our vessel. So we should not be masochistic in this sense, where we enjoy pain for the perverse pleasure of it. But we should not overindulge in material comforts either. there's a fine line. It's been stated several times that spiritual life is the razor's edge. Because if we're too hard on ourselves or we pick up too much austerity, then we will not be able to see the Lord. And similarly, if we make our lives too materially comfortable, we won't be able to see the Lord. It's actually, there's 14 planetary systems or dimensions, as the physicists would say, and Earth is situated right in the middle, because if it was much more opulent like the heavenly planets, then we would not have any desire or impetus to search after God. And if it was as bad as some of the hellish planets are in terms of the material distress, then again, we would not be able to endeavor for God's service. So we're in a very auspicious time and place, under very auspicious circumstances right now, to make progress, to become God conscious. And we, if we let this opportunity fall, then we're idiots, for lack of a better term. We're just totally ignorant if we don't take advantage of the opportunity that this human form of life has afforded us. 27 years of my life, I was in the category of perverse sense enjoyer. And then 40 days after my 27th birthday, I was reborn after a profound near-death experience. And then 2 months later, I found my spiritual master through his literature, and he saved my life. He gave me life. 61. How do we find a genuine spiritual master? The first step in attaining perfection is to take shelter of a bona fide spiritual master. By the Lord's will, everyone receives a spiritual master according to his own justification. Just as the Christians received Jesus Christ and the Muslims Prophet Muhammad. Moreover, according to their luck, materialists remain attached to material life by accepting family priests as their spiritual masters. But if we are fortunate and search sincerely for a bona fide spiritual master, and if we humbly pray to the Lord to attain the mercy of such a guru, then by the Lord's mercy, we will certainly receive a bona fide guru in this lifetime. Then by taking shelter at his lotus feet, our life will become successful. The Chaitanya Charitamrita states, Brahmanda Brahmite Kona Bhagyavan Jiva Guru Krishna Prasare Paya Bhakti Lata Vija. Out of many millions of wandering living entities, one who is very fortunate gets an opportunity to associate with a bona fide spiritual master by the grace of Krishna. By the mercy of both Krishna and the spiritual master, such a person receives the seed of the creeper of devotional service. Madhya Lila 19:151. Krishna yada kripa kare kona bhagyavane guru antaryami rupe sikaya apane. Krishna is situated in everyone's heart as the Chaitya Guru, the spiritual master within. When he is kind to some fortunate conditioned soul, he personally gives him lessons so he can progress in devotional service, instructing the person as the super soul within and the spiritual master without. Yes, we require a heading. So our vessel, our body is like a ship, and the spiritual master gives us the heading from without, and then from within, the spiritual master through the heart is the compass that guides us. I really love this example, but it's a little far out. Bob Lazar, who was supposedly worked at Area 51 and was previewed to a lot of these Vimanas, which are in Vedic is the equivalent of UFOs, except they're not unidentified in Vedic knowledge. They're celestial airplanes of the denizens of the heavenly planets. And so Bob Lazar worked on these ships, and what he equated it to was that there were two types of ships. There's those that worked on propulsion, and then there are those that worked on creating a gravitational void in front of the ship that the ship would then fall into. Well, this is the equivalent of surrendering. So when we surrender to the spiritual master, there's a material void created. The Red Sea is parted, and then we fall into that. So we're being sucked in by the mercy of our spiritual master. We are not endeavoring. This is not an ascending process. We cannot build a stairway to heaven. We cannot build a Tower of Babel and reach the stars. We are surrendering, and then the mercy descends to us, and we fall into spiritual substance. That's how it works. And so we require a spiritual master to guide us to that void. It's like he knows where the portal is, and he's showing us how to get to that portal. That's a harsh, it's a rough example, but it's the best one I can come up with right now. Guru Krishna Rupahana Shastrera Pramane Guru Rupa Krishna Kripa Karena Bhaktagane. According to the deliberate opinion of all revealed scriptures, the spiritual master is non-different from Krishna. Lord Krishna, in the form of the spiritual master, delivers his devotees. Adya Lila 145. Yadyapi amare guru chitanyera dasa tatapi janiye ami tanharda prakasha. Although I know that my spiritual master is a servitor of Sri Chaitanya, I know him also as a plenary manifestation of the Lord. Adi Lila 145. The spiritual master is forever tethered to the Supreme Lord. Like an umbilical cord. So he's receiving that superior energy unceasingly. He's reached the space where having once gone, one never returns. And from there he can teach us. And so although he may appear to be in this world, there's a tremendous depth. There's a tremendous depth to the spiritual master that cannot be imitated by a materialist who may exhibit external symptoms that seem spiritual, but in fact is just a very trained actor in the material arts, even in the mystical arts. Subtle energy and mystical energy. This is phenomenal, but it's not supernatural in the sense of it being spiritual. There's a whole spectrum of material mysticism that we aren't privy to within our current bodies and our current condition. But, there are creatures out there that, Sasquatch comes to mind because that's what my father and I studied for a long time. But in the Vedic literature, it is called Vanara, and it was created for the purpose of helping Lord Ramachandra. They're forest-dwelling men. They're just giant, type of humans that are very muscular, more simian. They're kind of like cross between ape and human, but they're on the human form of life spectrum. There are 400,000 species of human life. And these creatures, because they live in a natural environment, they are more self-surrendered to the Lord's will, and they therefore have use of these mystical abilities, such as making themselves smaller than the smallest, being able to enter rocks, making themselves, able to move across space-time in ways that we cannot, because we are, look at this. Look at the walls, right? The walls are square. Those don't appear in natural environments. Everything has a natural flow, and everything is self-surrendered in nature in a way that it isn't in these human hives that we live in, right? One should know the instructing spiritual master to be the personality of God, Krishna. Lord Krishna manifests himself as the supersoul and as the greatest devotee of the Lord. Jive shakshat nahi tate guru chitya rupe shiksha guru haya Krishna mahanta svarupe. One should know the instructing spiritual master to be the personality of Krishna. Lord Krishna manifests himself as the supersoul and as the greatest devotee of the Lord. Since one cannot visually experience the presence of the supersoul, he appears before us as a liberated devotee. Such a spiritual master is none other than Krishna himself. O Krishna Chandra, please accept me as your servant. I will not continue to serve this temporary material world while thinking of myself as an enjoyer. When a living entity sincerely and humbly prays to the Lord in this way, then the most merciful Krishna appears before him in the form of a liberated devotee. Unless we are fortunate enough to receive transcendental knowledge from a bona fide spiritual master, we cannot become qualified to engage in the Lord's service. Since no human being or demigod is capable of awarding such transcendental knowledge, we must find shelter under a bona fide spiritual master. 62. Who is a spiritual master, and how should he be served? The Guru and Vaishnavas are the transcendental home of the Supreme Lord. The Lord does not manifest just anywhere. He appears and remains in the hearts of Guru and the Vaishnavas. Many people want to see the Lord, but they do not know that the Lord's darshan can be had only through the spiritual master's darshan. We can only see the Lord by viewing our spiritual master. He's the deity made flesh for our benefit. It is not possible to regain devotional service without a spiritual master. The spiritual master is the via media between us and Krishna's lotus feet. This is Krishna's mercy. He sends his topmost servant, or Vaishnav, into this world to deliver everyone. Thus, the spiritual master is the personification of that causeless mercy. The spiritual master is our ever well-wisher. Therefore, it is not enough simply to serve him with awe and reverence from a distance. Instead, we must serve him with firm conviction and love. Then only will we attain perfection. The spiritual master is more important to us than Lord Krishna. The spiritual master is more important to us than Lord Krishna. Sri Gauranga Dev is the spiritual master of all gurus. He revealed to us that even though the spiritual master is not different from the Supreme Lord, he is the Lord's principal devotee. We cannot serve the Lord without our Guru's mercy, because our Guru is the Lord's topmost devotee. The living entities have no way to achieve auspiciousness other than to serve the spiritual master. I can attest. I was serving my false ego before I found Srila Prabhupada and his literature. And even well into understanding the literature, I was still serving my false ego. It's actually a daily battle. Because we serve our spiritual master a little bit, we become puffed up. We begin to think that we are the doers. And so Bhaktisiddhanta recommends that in the morning, we should beat our false ego down 100 times with a shoe, beat our mind, and then 100 times in the evening with a broomstick. This can be accomplished while we're chanting Hare Krishna. When we can perform devotional service in our mind constantly, so even if we don't have the articles, or even if we don't see the spiritual master before us, by bringing him to the forefront of our mind's eye and serving him in that way, that is as good as serving him directly. Now, of course, if he is on this planet and he demands material service from us, then we should serve him. But until he is presented to us, we should come into the habit of serving him day and night within our mind, with our intelligence, with everything at our disposal. And through thoughtful prayer and meditation, the answers of how to serve him will come to us. Generally, work should be performed, but it should also be enjoyed according to our unique propensities. Of course, there is no work without sacrifice. So it's a labor of love. Love is not always manifested through pleasure and joy. No, there can be anger involved in love. There can be different emotions. This is the variety, what they call the variegatedness of spiritual life. There's another work, Nectar of Devotion, that Srila Prabhupada described, where it talks about all the different emotions that can be experienced through spiritual ecstasy. And it's everything that you experience in the material world, except it's spiritualized emotion. And so we're not meant to give this up. We're not meant to falsely renounce our emotions. We're meant to use our emotions, use everything we have in service for his pleasure, for the Lord's pleasure. And the spiritual master guides us to that realization by his practical example. (63) Is the spiritual master's mercy Krishna's mercy? Lord Krishna bestows mercy upon us and gives all living entities shelter in the form of the spiritual master. Chaitanya Charitamrita states, Krishna yadi kripa kare kona bhagyavane guru antaryama yami rupe sikhaya apane. Krishna is situated in everyone's heart as the Chaitya Guru, the spiritual master within. When he is kind to some fortunate conditional soul, he personally gives him lessons so he can progress in devotional service, instructing the person as the supersoul within and the spiritual master without. Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Lila 145. Guru Krishna Rupahana Shastrera Pramane Guru Rupe Krishna Kripa Karena Bhaktagane. According to the deliberate opinion of all revealed scriptures, the spiritual master is non-different from Krishna. Lord Krishna is in the form of the spiritual master delivers his devotees. Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila 2247. The spiritual master's mercy and the mercy of Krishna are not two separate things. The spiritual master does not teach anything other than to worship Krishna. Lord Krishna also does not accept any service that has not been rendered by his devotees. So in our conditional material existence, we can only practice devotional life. And then at some point we will come fully surrendered and become a pure devotee. But in that preliminary stage of existence, we must offer everything to our spiritual master, and our spiritual master alone can offer it directly to Krishna, or he will offer it to his spiritual master, and so on and so on. It depends where we are positionally speaking within the hierarchy. So there's men of divine quality and there's men of demoniac quality, and both exist within a hierarchy. It's like a bell curve, right? And so on one end you have the great spiritual masters, and on the other hand you have the men of, Luciferian qualification, who are very they exist in like reptilian humanoid bodies that are just designed to exploit others. And within that you have a broad mixture, and so there's a constant push and pull between these two classes of beings. But if we can pull more people to divine quality, then we can slip them over into transcendental goodness, and then from there their path is set to go back to Godhead. Whereas the servants of Lucifer and those kind of people, they are trying to pull people into deep material exploitation so that they can live off of actually the superior energy that's coming through their soul from within. It's very vampiric, very scary when you're in there. It becomes a trap, and then all the people that are of that satanic mentality that rule the world, so to speak, they're all in this kind of like secret club because they know that if people really knew who they were, they would be so terrified and scared, and then immediately their regime would over. So when the demons are in power, as they are right now, they rule from the shadows through these vestiges, through these puppets, politicians, movie stars, this kind of stuff. And then you have the divine men of divine quality who rule out in the open, in the sunshine, as the divine servant of God. That's where we're headed. But in the meantime, these men of demoniac quality are not going to just give up. They rather see the world destroyed than turned over to God. And so the book of Revelation speaks about the events leading to the 10,000 year golden age. It says 1,000 years in the Bible because that's the period that the Christians will reign, or what, it's kind of nebulous. But Chaitanya Charitamrita, Lord Chaitanya talks about the 10,000 year golden age that was inaugurated 500 years ago. So whether you look at it as 10,000 years, 1,000 years, time works differently in that space once we enter it. That's why it's called the end of time. It's the end of linear desire. Linear time, as we understand it, is that you put a desire out there. Okay, I want to go, have an ice cream cone. Okay, that creates time because now you're striving for some result. And then once you get it, then it's the next desire and the next desire. And so this world is created of endless desires on a foundation of sex desire. And so we're constantly striving for some result. But as soon as those desires dissolve or disappear or is taken from us, then there is no linear time as we understand. That's the end times, right? The spiritual master's mercy and the mercy of Krishna are not two separate things. The spiritual master does not teach anything other than to worship Krishna. Lord Krishna also does not accept any service that has not been rendered by his devotee. The spiritual master offers everyone's service to Krishna. The eternally worshipable spiritual master is not an ordinary mundane human being. In order to fulfill the fallen souls, he appears in this world by Krishna's will and awards the fallen souls the seed of devotional service, the opportunity to serve the Lord. Krishna's mercy comes to us through the spiritual master. Chaitanya Charitamrita states, Brahmanda Brahmite Kona Bhagya Vanjiva Guru Krishna Prasade Paya Bhakti Lata Bija. Out of many millions of wandering living entities, one who is very fortunate gets an opportunity to associate with a bona fide spiritual master by the grace of Krishna. By the mercy of both Krishna and the spiritual master, such a person receives the seed of the creeper of devotional service. This is the process of begging. We should become very proficient at begging for the mercy to descend. We cannot attain a spiritual master. We have to beg. We have to pray to spiritual master that we will be presented with an instructional spiritual master. This should be the mentality. We cannot obtain anything by our own strength, let alone a spiritual preceptor who can deliver us from the clutches of the material pangs. Out of many millions of warriors. Yeah, so they alone have the qualification to plant that seed in our heart. But then it's up to us to water that seed by following their instructions. The spiritual master is not a friend like that we hang out with, although he can be. That's a higher level of spiritual ras, right? We have to be we have to undergo a lot of sacrifice to get to the point of being an intimate associate with the Lord or the spiritual master. But that's actually the progress that we're each going to have throughout our spiritual life. So first it's neutral, then we have to master the level of learning how to be a servant, and then once there we can be a friend, and then once there we can be a parent to the Lord or to the spiritual master, and then after that we can be a conjugal lover. That's Madhurya Ras, the mood of conjugal loving service to the Lord. This is the highest, to be engaged with the Lord. In my life, there's someone very dear to my heart who was my mother in a past life. And so we are just bodies performing a duty. But in the perverse material sense, we will think, oh, it's so gross. Why would you, have those loving sentiments for your mother? It's like, well, you're on the bodily platform if you think that way. Of course, it's gross to be incestuous with the body of your mother in this life, but to understand that spiritual life is not based on pleasing one's physical senses, it's based on pleasing the spiritual senses of the Lord. You go through these different types of relationships on your path back to Godhead. You need to learn how to serve each other before you can learn to serve God. You have to serve the other through. To directly serve the Lord and to directly serve the spiritual master is non-different. To directly serve somebody who's purified as a part and parcel of the absolute truth, as a part and parcel of Krishna, is non-different from Krishna. They're the same exact thing in quality. This is how we should think. And so it's just, there's so many people in your life. And if you have this sort of, what they call a twin flame connection, I hate that term. I don't hate it, but I think it's very perverted because people don't understand what it means to be a twin flame. It means to have gone through all the necessary preliminary stages of devotional life and then to enter into a conjugal loving relationship with the Supreme Lord in the center. That's what it means to be in a quote-unquote twin flame relationship. (64) Does Krishna appear in the form of a spiritual master to teach his own service? The Supreme Personality of Godhead has hands, and he is scratching his body with his hands. There is no difference between his body and his hands. He is serving himself. In the same way, in order to teach devotional service, the Lord personally appears in the form of a spiritual master. My spiritual master is non-different from the Lord. The Lord is the predominating object, and the spiritual master is the predominated object. The Lord is the worshipable God, and the spiritual master is the worshiper God. Lord Mukunda is the object of service, and the spiritual master who is most dear to Mukunda is the topmost servant. There is no one as dear to the Lord as my spiritual master. He is certainly most dear to Krishna, like two halves of a chickpea. Worshipable Krishna is one half, and worshiper Krishna is the other. The pastimes between them make them complete. The complete existence of the worshipable Lord is Krishna, and the complete existence of the worshiper Lord is my spiritual master. Lord Krishna is the predominating Supreme Brahman, and the spiritual master is the predominated Supreme Brahman. We are smaller than the smallest, and the spiritual master, who constantly serves the greatest, is greater than the greatest. The spiritual master is extremely dear to Lord Mukunda. The spiritual master's lotus feet are the best form of shelter. We will attain success if we accept the spiritual master who is dear to Krishna as servitor God. 65. Who can act as a spiritual master? Only a devotee of Krishna who knows the science of Krishna can act as guru. Since karmis, jnanis, and impersonalists are non-devotees, they can never become gurus. Only one who worships the Supreme Personality of Godhead is able to become a spiritual master. Those who think proudly that they are Krishna's servants cannot become spiritual masters unless they proudly identify themselves as disciples of a disciple. As long as we are proud to be Vaishnavas, we cannot become a guru. A person who acts as guru never claims to be a Vaishnav or spiritual master. My spiritual master never considered himself a Vaishnav. One who calls himself a Vaishnav is branded a non-Vaishnav. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Thakura has sung, "If I think I am a Vaishnav, I shall look forward to receiving others' respect. If the desire for fame and reputation pollutes my heart, I will certainly go to hell. I will give up the pride of being a guru and consider myself your eternal servant. I will sincerely accept your remnants and the water that has washed your lotus feet. By giving others the remnants of my food, I will think myself superior and be burdened by the weight of false pride. Therefore, always remaining your surrendered disciple, I will not accept worship from anyone else." Only a pure devotee can be a spiritual master. A great personality sees the spiritual master everywhere. Such a person is himself qualified to become a spiritual master because he can induce everyone to become Krishna conscious. Unless we are devotees ourselves, we cannot make other devotees. Therefore, to become guru, we must become devotees of Krishna. We must always engage in Krishna's service with all our senses. We are not qualified to act as spiritual master unless we are ourselves staunch disciples of our own spiritual master. A pure devotee thinks himself to be humbler than a blade of grass and more tolerant than a tree. He never says he has served his spiritual master enough and therefore no longer needs to offer service to his guru. He never thinks it is time for him to become guru. Although he may indeed act as spiritual master, he never becomes proud of it. 66. Is it important to take shelter at the feet of Vaishnavas? If we do not take shelter of a devotee's lotus feet, we cannot take shelter of Krishna's lotus feet. Without the association and shelter of the Lord's devotees, we can never obtain the Lord's service. We are all fallen souls and are therefore unable to benefit ourselves. Since we are fallen, we cannot be delivered until we take shelter of the lotus feet of the deliverer of fallen souls. There is no other way to achieve auspiciousness than to associate with devotees. 67. What is the meaning of initiation? In the beginning, we have to know about our relationship with the Supreme Lord. Initiation is another name for the kind of knowledge we gain when we come to understand our relationship with the Supreme Lord. Merely receiving instructions regarding how to chant mantras is not initiation. Initiation is that act by which we attain transcendental knowledge. The living entities cannot benefit themselves even after studying hundreds of pieces of literature or by making a show of whimsical worship. Mercifully, the spiritual master imparts transcendental knowledge unto his sincere disciples who are inclined to serve the Lord. Only a devotee who completely follows his spiritual master's orders by renouncing his independence is eligible to receive the spiritual master's mercy and become successful in attaining actual transcendental knowledge. So initiation is that act by which we attain transcendental knowledge. There's a quote in Bhagavad Gita. It says we should humbly approach the spiritual master because he can initiate us into knowledge. He has seen the truth. We have polluted senses, right? Our senses are imperfect. So someone with color blindness doesn't see the world the same way as someone without color blindness. Similar to someone who's who's intoxicated on alcohol, or who has taken mushrooms, or has taken DMT, or whatever the so-called mind-altering substance is. It shows us that our senses are imperfect because our state of mind can be altered depending on what is in our body. So our body is the most elaborate storage device on this planet. And by taking in things through our eyes, ears, nose, mouth, and such, those need to be digested. So we digest those properly when we spiritualize them, when we see them in proper context to Krishna. Now, the more complicated this world becomes technologically, the harder it is for us to digest things as they're ingested, because they're so complicated. They represent so many reflected desires of the people who created them. And then we have to somehow process all that. So, it's very easy to eat and process white rice. You eat the rice, and it's essentially, especially basmati rice, you eat the rice, it's essentially burned up in your stomach, it's assimilated easily, and you use it as energy and it's gone. Now, if you go to the store and you buy something, like some processed brownie that's made in a factory and it has like 100+ ingredients in it, then that's difficult. That's a lot to process. And so those chemicals, the consciousness of the individuals who created those substances, all of that gets stored in your vessel, and then somehow you have to, contend with that. Also, if we take things that are too raw, if we eat a lot of raw food, those similarly are difficult for our body to process. So it's the razor's edge. Again, we shouldn't take things that are too raw, and we shouldn't take things that are over processed. We should take raw things that are organic and lovely and beautiful, and prepare nice, create nice preparations for the pleasure of our Lord based off of what we know he likes to eat, and then present those to him, and then accept the remnants. And that should be done with everything in the material world, not just eatables. And in this way, we will be able to properly assimilate them because they have already been spiritualized. Okay. 68. What does it mean that the spiritual master does not make disciples? An actual spiritual master does not make disciples. Rather, he makes everyone his spiritual master. He makes godless people devotees of Krishna. He pleases Krishna by engaging everyone in the Lord's service. His activities and behavior are consistent with devotion. He always sees everything in relation to Krishna and in relation to his own spiritual master. He does not see anything with an enjoying spirit or from a mundane viewpoint. As medical professors do not make students but doctors, the spiritual master does not make disciples but spiritual masters. If the Vaishnava does not execute a spiritual master's duty, then the Vaishnava's family, the disciplic succession, will be checked. If, however, a Vaishnava acts as if he were a spiritual master, he will become a non-Vaishnava. Therefore, we should not try to act as if we were spiritual masters if we are not qualified to serve in that way. If we do, we will bring about our own ruination. A spiritual master does not proudly consider himself guru. Yeah. On the path of devotion, there will be so many hiccups where in the course of preaching, we will get caught up in the idea of wanting to be falsely honored by others. You know, why aren't you just listening to me? You know, but that's a projection of our own anarthas, unwanted things of our heart onto other people. And so it's actually a natural process. It says Satan expels Satan. So those demoniac things within us, by sincerely endeavoring to offer them to Krishna, will automatically become spiritualized in the process. But, you know, yeah, a spiritual master does not proudly consider himself a guru. No, he considers himself a servant of his guru. That's a fact. 69. What is karta-bhaja, self-worship? Karta-bhaja is an unauthorized sampradaya or sect. Sampradaya is a disciplic succession. The followers of this sect are not Vaishnavas. They imagine that the spiritual master is Krishna himself, that is, that the guru is the supreme enjoyer. Therefore, they think there is no need to worship Krishna. This is atheism. While it is true that the spiritual master is not different from Krishna, it is not true that he is the supreme enjoyer. He is servitor God, a topmost devotee, the personification of devotional service. He is most dear to Krishna. In order to teach us how to serve him, Lord Krishna appears in this world in the form of various spiritual masters. The spiritual master is not the energetic, but the Lord's energy. He is expert in rendering the Lord's service. He personifies devotion. Since he is servitor God, he has no tinge of material desire. This is why Vaishnavas, who are attached to his lotus feet, can serve Krishna under his guidance. They adopt the process of devotional service as their life and soul. They never consider their spiritual master Rasa, Bihari, Gopinath, or Radhanath. 70. Of what type of guru should we take shelter? If I am fortunate enough, I will take shelter of a spiritual master who always worships Hari. I should worship a spiritual master who is 100% engaged in the Lord's service. Otherwise, unable to follow his ideal example, I will not be able to engage myself 100% in the Lord's service. A person devoid of proper etiquette, a platform speaker, or a professional priest cannot become guru. If we receive such a spiritual master, unfortunately, we cannot learn to worship Hari. A spiritual master must be freed from material desire, self-controlled, well-conversant with scripture, and self-realized. Srimad Bhagavatam states, Tasmad Gurum Prapadyata Gyasuhu Shreya Uttamam Sabde Pare Cha Nishnatan Brahmani Upasam Masrayan. Therefore, any person who seriously desires real happiness must seek a bona fide spiritual master and take shelter of him by initiation. The qualification of the bona fide guru is that he has realized the conclusions of the scriptures by deliberation and is able to convince others of these conclusions. Such great personalities who have taken shelter of the Supreme Godhead, leaving aside all material considerations, should be understood to be bona fide spiritual masters. Is it possible to remain materialistic after seeing the spiritual master? If we proudly think we are great, we cannot become humble. Even though we are servants, we would prefer to be masters. As a result, we would bring about our own ruination because we would come to see everything as fit for our enjoyment rather than for Krishna's enjoyment. If we can see everything in relation to Guru and Krishna, we will not see it as meant for our personal enjoyment. When we wear blue spectacles, everything appears blue. By seeing everything in relation to Guru and Krishna, we come to see everything through divine vision. Everything will rightly appear worshipable. This universe is full of objects for the service of the master of this universe. Therefore, all objects are worshipable. If we are endowed with spiritual vision, we can easily see Krishna. Just as the mother, who is meant to be enjoyed by the father and not by me, the father is meant to be served by me. Similarly, I am meant to serve and worship this material world, which is meant for the universal Father's enjoyment. If we actually take shelter of a spiritual master and serve him sincerely with love, we will certainly attain Krishna's service along with transcendental knowledge about him. We have to act in a way that doesn't bring us into the association of gross materialists and women. Then we will be able to treat objects meant for Krishna's enjoyment as worshipable. Our service propensity will be awakened when we stop considering ourselves enjoyers of women and matter. When we are free of this enjoying propensity, we will actually be able to realize Krishna. Even after we accept initiation, if we continue to maintain an enjoying spirit, we are fallen. Therefore, I advise those who want auspiciousness to catch hold of their bona fide spiritual master's lotus feet and serve him as if their life and soul. In this way, their perfection will be guaranteed. An obedient and faithful disciple never falls down. Devotees who are attached to the spiritual master's lotus feet will certainly attain Krishna's lotus feet. Now, of course, a man with a woman mentality or a woman with a woman mentality are equally as dangerous and should be avoided. But a woman who is not on the bodily platform any longer is no longer to be considered a woman. She's meant to be considered a Vaishnava. Similarly, a man who may have previously had the mentality of a woman, but now is on the platform of spiritual understanding through purified knowledge, they too are to be considered a Vaishnava. So this isn't bashing women or men or holding one up against the other. No, it is simply stating the necessity to avoid material distinction. 72 is receiving the spiritual master's mercy, the only way to attain Krishna's mercy. The spiritual master is non-different from Lord Nityananda. By his mercy, we receive Krishna's holy name, initiation into Krishna mantras, and proper instruction by which we can attain eternal auspiciousness. Without the spiritual master's mercy, we cannot receive the mercy of Lord Gauranga and Sri Radha Govinda. Our previous Acharya, Srila Narottam Das Thakura, has explained this. The jiva's material existence is exhausted, and the wealth of love of God is attained simply by their receiving the spiritual master's mercy. The spiritual master, who is our devotional teacher, is an intimate devotee of Sri Gauranga. By serving such a guru with love, our perfection is guaranteed. Those whose hearts have become hard due to material attachment cannot chant the holy name of Krishna, who killed the Aga demon purely. If, however, we hear Hari's holy name attentively from the mouth of the spiritual master, then the holy name will certainly intoxicate us. If the spiritual master bestows unconditional mercy upon us, seeing our sincere humility and eagerness, glorification of Hari will come from our mouth with intensity. 73. How can we understand the actual truth? Faith, devotion, and taste of godless people are always opposed to devotion. With such faith, devotion, and taste, human beings will never be able to understand actual truth. When the absolute truth personally appears by his causeless mercy, he reveals himself to the surrendered souls in the form of the Supersoul. The Lord reveals to sincere souls to whom they should surrender. Actual truth comes down to us through the pure and perfect process of disciplic succession. 74. Who is the internal spiritual master? The localized Paramatma, the individual Godhead, situated within the heart of every living entity, who's described in the Vedas beginning with the verse Dvasuparna, is the internal, pure, unalloyed, conscious spiritual master, the Chaitya Guru. 75. How will we receive a bona fide spiritual master? The Supreme Lord is present in our heart as the internal spiritual master and outside our heart as a pure devotee. If we are sincere, the Lord will guide us to a pure devotee. We may approach him and beg for such mercy, but he is the soul in charge for granting our wish. We cannot question him if he refuses to grant it. Krishna is not the caretaker of our garden. Our duty is to wait patiently for his mercy. In the meantime, we should give up material desire and engage in his service. If we sincerely seek his mercy, we will certainly bestow it upon he will certainly bestow it upon us. Simply by his mercy, we will obtain a bona fide spiritual master. Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita states, Krishna yadi kripa kare kona bhagyavane guru antaryami rupe shikaya apane. Krishna is situated in everyone's heart as the Chaitya Guru, the spiritual master within. When he is kind to some fortunate conditioned soul, he personally gives him lessons so he can progress in devotional service, instructing the person as the super soul within and the spiritual master without. So you can see this has been repeated. Whenever something is repeated, it is very important. There's a famous quote that's in this age of quarrel and hypocrisy, the only means of deliverance is chanting the holy names. There is no other way, there is no other way, there is no other way. So we can tell that that's very important. We have to chant the holy names if we want to be delivered. So similarly, if Bhaktisiddhanta is stating this quote more than once, as he is, that Krishna is situated in everyone's heart as the Guru, spiritual master within, then we should take that very seriously. It is not allegorical, it is not metaphorical, it is fact. It is the absolute truth. You know, Bhaktisiddhanta, he was the lion guru. There were other Mayavadis and impersonalists and such who would see him walking down the street and they would cross the street just so they didn't have to argue with him. He was so defeating in that way. Just so brilliant. So brilliant. You can just hear in his writing. It's just every word is like a shot to the heart. Amazing. It's like Nietzsche, you know. You read Nietzsche and every line is like, whoa, boom, boom. Similarly, this is just pure nectar. How can we understand the absolute truth? The absolute truth is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is the cause of all causes. The absolute truth is self-manifest. He is not dead matter. He is fully cognizant. He manifests before us out of his own sweet will. It is impossible to know him by mundane experience or the ascending path. The absolute is not an object belonging to the third dimension. We can measure objects belonging to the third dimension. Anything that can be measured with our material senses belongs to the world of Maya. And we have to open our eyes if we wish to see the sun. We have to wait until our internal spiritual consciousness is revived before we can realize the absolute. As we cannot see the sun at night, even if we illuminate the sky with thousands of electric lights, and as there is no need of artificial lighting once the sun rises in the morning, so the absolute truth cannot be illuminated by sensually acquired knowledge. As long as we are materially conditioned, we cannot understand the absolute truth's identity. We must hear about him from our spiritual master. Thus, there is no way to know the absolute truth except to surrender to our spiritual master's lotus feet. (77) How will I understand whether or not a spiritual master is bona fide? The spiritual master we choose, or a person who, according to our consideration, is qualified to be guru, may not be bona fide. Only a person sent to us personally by Krishna will manifest before us as the spiritual master. (78) What is the function of the Chaitya Guru, Super Soul, and the other forms of Guru? The Supreme Lord regulates the living entities' good and bad propensities by residing in their hearts as the Super Soul. The Super Soul, or internal spiritual master, directs all living entities. The Super Soul also guides us to a spiritual master. Aside from this, the spiritual master's servants act as instructing spiritual masters. Persons who glorify the Shastras, who explain a Shastra to others, and who act according to Shastric injunctions, regulate the restless, anartha-filled minds of ignorant people. Anarthas, unwanted things. Such instructing spiritual masters help people before they receive initiation from a spiritual master. Without the mercy of the internal spiritual master, the Chaitya Guru, no one can become qualified to serve the lotus feet of the initiating and instructing spiritual masters. Until we accumulate piety in the form of Krishna's mercy, we cannot achieve the true mercy of the Chaitya Guru. As long as our hearts are filled with the desire for religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation, we cannot aspire for devotional service. If due to good fortune we desire to take shelter at the Lord's lotus feet, then the internal spiritual master will mercifully guide us to initiating and instructing gurus. The devotee spiritual master is attained by the Chaitya Guru's mercy. The Chaitya Guru bestows mercy in two ways, and it is because of these two forms of mercy that some people become materialists and others become devotees. Materialists are people who have accepted sense gratification as their ultimate goal instead of searching for devotional service, which is the ultimate goal of life. Such people seek temporary happiness. This is the Chaitya Guru's tricky mercy. Only a cheater is fit to receive such tricky mercy. Pious, sincere devotees, however, become glorious by receiving the Chaitya Guru's true mercy. If someone who despite being the Supreme Lord's servant, wants something other than his Lord's service, what can he be but a cheater? An instructing spiritual master teaches a surrendered disciple to accept an initiating spiritual master. Therefore, even though there may be many instructing spiritual masters, there is no difference in opinion between such gurus and the initiating spiritual master who awards the disciple transcendental knowledge. Rather, an instructing spiritual master is the real friend of the initiating spiritual master. Again, it goes back to spiritual hierarchies. A spiritual entity's awareness of his constitutional position is revived when he receives transcendental knowledge. At that time, those who give instructions regarding the process of Hari's devotional service are called instructing spiritual masters. The initiating spiritual master is situated between the commander-in-chief and the ordinary soldiers who are in the form of instructing spiritual masters. Only a person who is favored by the Lord in the form of the Chaitya Guru receives the good fortune to understand the devotees of the Lord and his bona fide spiritual master. Only by the Lord's mercy can a living entity see the beauty of a bona fide spiritual master's toenails and thus make his life successful. So in a demoniac hierarchy, you're meant to stay in your position, right? And if you try to ascend that position, you have to step over other people, you have to exploit other people, whether directly or indirectly, in order to get to the top of the pyramid. But in spiritual hierarchies, your only qualification is your willingness and openness to accept the love and the direction from the higher authorities. And by accepting that, you automatically become elevated. That's the difference. So beautiful, right? So beautiful. 79. In spite of accepting mantras, why are our minds still unregulated? If our minds remain unregulated after having received mantras, it means we have not actually received the mantras. Giving mantras is more than whispering something or blowing air into someone's ears. Accepting mantra initiation means to accept transcendental knowledge. This transcendental knowledge smashes to pieces the pillars of the nations we have accumulated since time immemorial, then builds pillars of eternal truth out of transcendental knowledge. Accepting formalized initiation on the material platform is absolutely useless if we aren't initiated into transcendental knowledge. You can lay hands on someone, you can anoint their head with water, you can do all of that. But if you're not receiving transcendental knowledge from that person and feel it within yourself, within the super soul who gives you confirmation, those are just ritualistic activities, nothing more than that. Someone asked Prabhupada, how will we be initiated when you leave your body? He left his body in 1977. His response was, if you read my books and you follow them, you're already initiated. So this idea that we must get formally initiated, it's good to get initiated by a bona fide spiritual master. That way you can become authorized, you can become a priest, other people can look at you and say, this person is qualified. to give this kind of information. That is all important. But what is more important is the sanctification, the eternality, the salvation of our soul. This is beyond all material impediments, and that only happens through the torchlight of knowledge. I am the absolute truth. Only an empowered personality can reveal the absolute truth. This empowered personality is the spiritual master. Many insignificant agents or messengers come into this world, but the most powerful messengers are sent by God. Krishna adapts them to the needs of the recipients and calls them spiritual masters. Such expert personalities reveal the absolute truth. Only such spiritual masters can destroy our mental speculation and bring about a radical change in our spiritual propensity. The knowledge we receive from the spiritual master is not mundane, but transcendental spiritual. The transcendental knowledge is Krishna. Krishna is eternal and full of knowledge and bliss. Mantra is fully cognizant. Mantra can definitely regulate our mind. It can deliver the mind from both vice and virtue and award as the qualification to cultivate real spiritual life, and award us the qualification to cultivate real spiritual life. One of my spiritual masters and servants was Stanley Kubrick. I was at a certain point in my life when I required a deeper understanding of material law and destroying the held beliefs I had about that. And so by studying his films in depth, I came to understand how sexual energy rules the mind of a materialist, how this world is reflected desires. All of this is embedded in his work. He was a fully self-realized individual, if you aren't aware by now. He was also the reincarnated soul of Isaiah from the Bible. Yes, nobody knows that, but he was. And so he preached according to the time, place, and circumstance he appeared into, and that's why people have religious experiences watching his films, because he used the medium of the day to get across transcendental information. So he is a bona fide spiritual master, and he never outwardly tried to act as a spiritual master in the traditional way we're conditioned to believe a spiritual master, sage on a stage, right? No, he didn't do that. In fact, he actually really enjoyed his solitude and let his fruit, his works, speak for themselves. I love that he would complete a movie, and after he was done with it, he would never watch it again. It was on to the next thing. He understood it's about work and love, both of these. You pour your heart and soul into your work, and by that, and then you accept the love from the Lord, and through that, the love is you just become an instrument. And Kubrick realized he was an instrument of the Lord's service. And if you look at the times, like there's a lot of clocks and watches and numbers and stuff in his movies. If you type in that number and Bible verse in Google, Bible verses will come up that will correspond to the scene in question. That's how you know he was a prophet. Christopher Nolan does similar things, but we'll get to him later. 80. What do we need to know now? What do we need to do now? We must hear from a bona fide spiritual master. When we first hear from Guru, his words appear revolting to us. Some unfortunate people dare to think we can correct our spiritual master by our own experience. But the current of mundane thoughts cannot attack the spiritual master. He is situated millions of miles from such thoughts. He is known as Guru because his position does not shift. He is the heaviest personality. Yeah, I remember reading Bhagavad Gita for the first time and actually crossing out sections in the book because they didn't dovetail with my material conditioning. As you progress further, you realize how ignorant you were to the facts, and that you just like medicine, it tastes bitter. Somebody with diabetes who's eaten sweet things their whole life, they need to take bitter melon or neem or some other, kale, something very bitter to cure them of their diseased condition, but they hate it. They don't want to do it. Similarly, someone with jaundice, they they have too much pitta, they have too much heat in their liver, and so they need to take sugar, which is cooling, and it tastes bitter to them until they take it and they force themselves to eat it, and then it finally tastes sweet again. So we need to learn how to take the medicine properly and then take it. And otherwise we're just gonna fall more into our disease condition. He is known as Guru because his position does not shift. He is the heaviest personality. Yeah, Guru means heavy. Jupiter is the Guru planet. It's a big one. 81. What is the result of taking shelter of the feet of a bona fide spiritual master? By taking shelter of a bona fide spiritual master, a living entity can make the highest advancement on the path of worshipping Hari. By serving Guru and Krishna, a living entity's mundane conceptions are destroyed and he attains Goloka. As a result of sincere service, a living entity can attain an equal position with liberated souls, even eternally liberated souls. The spiritual master, who is non-different from Lord Nityananda, is not a lump of flesh and blood. By taking shelter at his lotus feet, a living entity can attain freedom from the threefold material miseries. 82. Is it most offensive to disobey the spiritual master's order? To disobey the spiritual master's order is the third offense in chanting the holy name. To disregard the spiritual master means to consider him an ordinary living being, a product of matter, and an insignificant person. To neglect his service is also an offense against the holy name. If we commit offenses against our spiritual master, the holy name will not appear in our heart. Without the spiritual master's mercy, human beings cannot become liberated from the influence of high birth, opulence, vast knowledge, and fame. Such persons will be unable to attain service at the Lord's lotus feet. The spiritual master is the direct manifestation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is the servitor God, yet he is non-different from the worshipable God. The spiritual master is simultaneously one and different from Nanda Maharaj's son, Krishna. Just as we cannot see the sun with the help of either sun rays or an artificial light, we cannot see Krishna on our own. But when, by the strength of the spiritual master's mercy, the fire for material enjoyment is extinguished in our heart, we will be able to see Krishna face to face. However hard we may, as in unexpected ways. However hard we may try to achieve knowledge about the transcendental truth, absolute truth, without the spiritual master's mercy, we will find that we are laboring uselessly. It will be as if we were beating a husk after the grain had been removed. Our attainment of scriptural knowledge depends on the spiritual master's mercy. To try to attain scriptural knowledge with the help of academic qualifications is as futile as pouring ghee onto ashes. Ghee is used in sacrificial fires. Ghee, butter with all the impurities taken out of it. We should never be faithless when hearing the words of Shastra or Guru. That is an offense. It is necessary to have complete faith in the words of the spiritual master and the scriptures if we are to understand the absolute truth. The fourth offense in chanting is to not have complete faith in the Shastric statements. 83. Isn't the dust from the feet of Guru and Vaishnavas worshipable? If the spiritual master and the saintly persons mercifully allow us to take dust from their lotus feet, we should respectfully accept it. However, there is a possibility of inviting inauspiciousness if we forcibly or by request try to take dust from their lotus feet. One day, when a person named Vrindavan Chandra Lashkar touched my spiritual master's lotus feet, my spiritual master became upset and said, "How dare you touch my feet? You will go to hell." When Lashkar told me about it, I explained, even persons like Brahma have difficulty achieving the spiritual master's lotus feet. Attaining the spiritual master's feet is rare. Therefore, what right or qualification do we have to touch the Guru's feet? We cannot approach the spiritual master unless we are eligible. We cannot approach the spiritual master with our sinful mentalities and offensive hearts. One day, out of his causeless mercy, my spiritual master personally took the dust from his own lotus feet and smeared it on my head. Such was his mercy. Yeah. What are the initiating and instructing gurus? What is the function of the guru who dwells in the heart? There are 3 types of spiritual masters: the initiating guru, the instructing guru, and the chaitya guru. The spiritual master is never ordinary. He is godly. It is an offense to separate the spiritual master from Sri Krishna Chaitanya by considering him an ordinary, insignificant human being. In the form of the spiritual master, Krishna alone awakens the living entity's spiritual consciousness and thereby helps him attain eternal benefit. The initiating spiritual master awards transcendental knowledge, knowledge of the absolute truth. Krishna alone is my eternal master and I am his eternal servant. The transcendental knowledge, or sambandha gyan, is imparted by the initiating spiritual master. An instructing spiritual master first tells us how to remove anarthas, then teaches us the process of pure devotion. In most cases, the initiating spiritual master acts as the instructing spiritual master. A conditional soul cannot act as an initiating or instructing spiritual master. An initiating spiritual master gives both mantras and instructions on bhajan. An instructing spiritual master teaches the process of bhajan after our anarthas are destroyed. Bhajan is spiritual practice. Sri Hari, who dwells in our hearts as the Supersoul, is the internal spiritual master, Chaitya Guru. Chaitanya Charitamrita states, Krishna yadi kripa kare kona bhagyavane guru antya taryami rupa shikaya apane. Krishna is situated in everyone's heart as the Chaitya Guru, the spiritual master within. When he is kind to some fortunate conditioned soul, he personally gives him lessons so he can progress in devotional service, instructing the person as the super soul within and the spiritual master without. The Chaitya Guru awards us the qualification to realize the instructions we have heard from the initiating and instructing gurus. He also imparts the strength to follow these orders. Without his mercy, no one can understand the intention of either the initiating or instructing spiritual master. Lord Sri Gaurangadev alone awards transcendental knowledge and pure devotional service through the initiating spiritual master, protects that pure devotion by sending the instructing spiritual masters who are non-different from him, and as the internal spiritual master personally awards the strength to follow the Guru's orders and teachings. 85. Is anything possible without the spiritual master's mercy? I am blinded by ignorance, so who will show me the right path? Who will impart to me real knowledge? Everything is attained simply by the spiritual master's mercy. We are fallen, conditioned souls, and the spiritual master is our only shelter. A spiritual master is he who always serves the Supreme Lord. The spiritual master is the servitor God. Are we looking at him in that way? If not, how can we expect to benefit from his association? '86. What actions will bring us auspiciousness? By serving the spiritual master with great faith, we will definitely attain auspiciousness. Human beings work hard in this world of distress simply so they can suffer more and more. This is Maya's arrangement for the conditioned souls. Those who are busy trying to attain worldly happiness certainly invite inauspiciousness. Due to their aversion to the Lord's service, human beings have developed such a mentality. They cannot understand that their distress is caused by their endeavor to achieve personal happiness. The entire 14 worlds are a place of such inauspiciousness. Unfortunately, we have currently developed the strong misconception that we are the doer. How can we free ourselves from such misconception? We have to take shelter at the spiritual master's lotus feet and engage in the Supreme Lord's service. At present, we are busy enjoying this world under the control of our senses. We have come to this world by opposing the Lord's service. We think, let everyone gratify my senses. If anyone disturbs my sense gratification, he is bad. The only way to become free of such a miserable condition is to take shelter at the spiritual master's lotus feet. Is the spiritual master great? We are smaller than the smallest, and the spiritual master is greater than the greatest. The spiritual master serves the great, and that great is controlled by his love. Those who worship Krishna in the mood of Madhurya Ras, conjugal love, accept the spiritual master as non-different from the daughter of Rishabhanu. Those who are candidates for Vatsalya Ras accept him as the manifestation of Nanda and Yashoda, paternal love. Those who serve on the platform of Sakya Ras know the spiritual master as one of Krishna's friends, such as Sudam or Sridham, as well as a manifestation of Lord Nityananda, who is the Lord of Krishna's friends. Those who pursue Dasya Ras consider the spiritual master a manifestation of Nanda Maharaj's servants, such as Raktaka and Patraka. The spiritual master is the predominated spiritual lord. No one should misunderstand him to be the original predominating supreme lord or object of service. There's a difference between how we see the spiritual master when we have anarthas and how we see the spiritual master when we are free from anarthas. We have to serve the Lord in the same way our spiritual master serves him. If we serve the Lord whimsically and independently, we will not be successful. Material existence means the mundane conception of life. Our misconceptions can be removed by the spiritual master's mercy. Because the spiritual master sees everything with equal vision, the Lord's devotees know that this world is meant to be used in the Lord's service. When our hearts are free of material desire, we will see every impediment with experience as Krishna's mercy. Our ruination is inevitable if we think that the spiritual master is an imperfect, mortal being like ourselves, or that he is little better than we are. The spiritual master is our life and soul. Without his shelter, we will not be able to understand the spiritual conception of life, and our journey will be limited to the platform of direct, indirect, and beyond the direct and indirect. Maya refers to what we can see, smell, touch, and enjoy. We have to become servants of the transcendental Lord. We cannot achieve such service through a hired priest or the representative of a hired priest. And finally, 88. Oh, nope, two more. 88. What is the spiritual master's identity? The spiritual master is as good as Lord Hari. This does not mean that he is the supreme enjoyer. Rather, he is servitor God. So you can see that many things are repeated, and it's because we have faulty memory. We lose things very quickly from the forefront of our consciousness. There used to be a time when people could hear things once and remember it. Boom, done, it's there. Because they were fully self-surrendered to the Lord. Krishna states in the Bhagavad Gita, I am situated in the heart, and from me come wisdom, knowledge, and forgetfulness. So by meditating on him all the time, our memory can become perfect. Our remembrance of things, as we need to utilize them in service, will be there for us. But in our conditional state, memory is very poor, and so we need to hear things over and over and over again. And it becomes increasingly relishable the more we hear it. Just like somebody who has cancer must go to chemotherapy constantly. We require a constant dosage of medicine to get better. The spiritual master is Krishna, yet an individual, topmost devotee of Krishna. Krishna is the object of all spiritual pastimes, and the spiritual master is the best among the supporters of those pastimes. There's no better devotee of Krishna in this world than the spiritual master. The spiritual master is one and not 5 or 10. He is an associate of Krishna. If associates of the Lord are separated from the Lord, then the Lord's supremacy is denied. This will result in revolution against the Lord. The spiritual master is not separate from the Lord. Although the spiritual master and his worshipable Lord are one, they possess different characteristics. We should not attempt to eliminate the object of worship from its worshiper. The non-devotees conclude that the spiritual master's position is temporary, that he is only a means to an end and not eternally worshipable. By treating the spiritual master with such an abominable, low-class mentality, however, we will certainly go to hell. Only Krishna can give himself away. Krishna gives himself to the spiritual master, and the spiritual master can then give Krishna away to others. The spiritual master alone can give away Krishna. That spiritual master who gives Krishna away to others resides eternally in Goloka Vrindavan. He was present before material time came into being, and he will remain afterwards. Only one who does not serve the spiritual master can never become a spiritual master himself, because the spiritual master teaches by his personal example how to serve Guru and Krishna. A spiritual master is that person who eternally serves Krishna without fail. Every action the spiritual master performs is motivated by the desire to give Krishna pleasure. It is not the spiritual master's job to become God, because opposing God is an action of low-class, insignificant creatures. The spiritual master can never be a non-devotee. He is self-realized and expert in allotting service to his disciples according to their particular qualifications. So I'm filming something right now because that was my thing. I knew how to light a subject. I knew how to get good sound. I knew how to set up an environment to make it look pretty. And so my spiritual master has awarded me the service of getting to film myself for your benefit. I'm just becoming a vessel of his mercy for you. We will certainly achieve perfection if we receive such a great personality as our spiritual master. A spiritual master who encourages our sense gratification is not a spiritual master, but a flatterer. A spiritual master who does not want to see his disciple progress approves everything his disciple does. A genuine spiritual master does not do so because he is not a flatterer. A spiritual master is not the disciple of his disciples, nor is he their order supplier. I love that. He's not their order supplier. He does not flatter others, but carries Krishna's order to them. Lord Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and there is no abomination in his existence. The spiritual master is an eternally liberated devotee of the Lord. He is devoid of unwanted things of the heart. The spiritual master imparts knowledge regarding the Lord's energies, glories, and identity. The spiritual master appears in this world to benefit us. Our spiritual masters are eternally perfected beings. They have not attained perfection by the strength of their sadhana, but were already perfect. If we do not serve such a spiritual master, we will become proud, remain far away from the humble vision of being lower than a blade of grass, and will not become established as Krishna's servants. Despite receiving shelter at the feet of a bona fide spiritual master, we have not been able to take advantage of it because we do not pay Guru Dakshin. To pay sacrifice to the Guru. To not pay Guru Dakshin after having accepted the spiritual master's shelter is cheating. Do we feel that we belong to our spiritual master? If not, how will we serve? By serving the spiritual master with love and devotion as surrendered souls, all our anarthas and prejudices will be destroyed. Only through serving the Guru can we achieve auspiciousness. To become indifferent to the spiritual master's service is the path of degradation. Although the spiritual master is eternally worshipable, he is the embodiment of the Lord's service. He is the personification of devotional service to the Lord. The spiritual master is full of Krishna consciousness. He is always absorbed in thoughts of Krishna's service. The spiritual master's name, form, qualities, and pastimes are all fully engaged in the Lord's service. Service to the Supreme Lord is his existence, his identity, his quality, and his pastime. He is expert in loving the Lord and is an experienced teacher of loving devotional service. The spiritual master is the captain to help us cross the ocean of material existence. He gives us both the holy name and love of God. He is the perfect guide, an acharya for teaching us how to chant the holy name and to give us knowledge of our relationship with Krishna. 89. Is there harm in not properly following the spiritual master's orders? By not following the orders of the all-auspicious spiritual master, the living entities invite suffering. Such disobedience or neglect increases their material desires, and they go to hell after being dead. After death. Anyone who does not obey his spiritual master's orders is certainly a materialist and offender. Those who transgress the spiritual master's orders take birth as pigs. Those who are too attached to material enjoyment cannot attain benefit because they do not serve the spiritual master with heart and soul, even though due to good fortune they have received a bona fide guru. Since they do not understand the value of such an invaluable gift, they consider the temporary material world eternal and suffer birth after birth. Thank you very much for joining me for part 3 of the Spiritual Master. I'm planning to continue this series on Amritavani, Nectar of Instructions for Immortality. The next chapter is A Devotee's Vision. And so I'd be delighted if you would join me for the next video I make in this series. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.